Our message this morning from Paul in the book of Acts. Paul is always a very difficult writer to grasp. So let's break it down and see if it helps our understanding of all. We go back to some of the specific verses. Paul said to rejoice in our sufferings. Now I got to tell you, in my whole life experience, and with my gray hair, you can tell it's been a bit, I have never mastered the ability of being able to rejoice in my suffering. I don't know about you, but I can't do it. But he also says that suffering produces endurance. Now that I can somewhat agree with, as it fits the no pain, no gain theory of improvement or advancement, but you got to put asterisks around that, right? There's got to be limits to how much of suffering actually produces endurance versus breaks you down. And then endurance produces character, and I can attest to that absolutely. That as I've built character over my lifespan, and I've seen others do it, that's part of life's path. But then he says character produces hope. Now, how in the world does character produce hope? And he has this great sentence. Hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. Hope does not put us to shame. So it's something worthy of pursuing. And in these overwhelming times, Paul's message that somehow hope is nurtured in the midst of our sufferings, how can that be possible? How do we find hope in the midst of despair? How do we find hope? So in my attempts to answer that question, I find myself going back to the beginning, going to the very beginning, the opening passages of the Bible, to Genesis, of course. Genesis 1. And God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. There's some startling things in there, but let's start with behold. When was the last time you used behold? Let's do some background information to guide our refreshment. We don't use behold. In our historical English Bible, which is called the King James, they used it. It was used 1,326 times in the King James. In the English Standard Version, it was used 1,100 times. But the English Standard Version is just a modernization of King James. But if we look at the NRSV, which most of us use, and certainly all progressive pastors use, it's used 24 times. Its root is in the Hebrew, so the Old Testament, but there's no Greek equivalent to it, so in the New Testament, you're not going to find behold. But what does it mean? So if we go to a resource, a great resource, which is the New Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible that I use, it says to behold is to gaze intently at something. To behold would be a long look compared with the opposite, which is a quick glance. So to behold is to understand at a deeper level. To look deeply at a situation, at a person, at an event, at creation, and understand at a deeper level than you would if you just gave it a glance. And then there's this whole good thing. What does good mean in the Bible? Good in the Bible expresses a satisfying experience of reality rather than an abstract idea or a moral norm. It's an experience of the reality. So when God is saying this is good, that's the reality. Let's get into that. It's more commonly used as an adjective to describe or praise the beautiful feature, desirable quality, or useful purpose of a person, a thing, or event. Let's go back to the story of creation. Just to bring you up to speed. Genesis is a poem. It's not a factual how to construct a universe. If you use it as a how to build guide, you're going to be hopelessly lost because some things come before other things which make no sense at all. So it's poetry. Instead of factual truth, it is metaphors in which truth is revealed at a deeper level than we would understand it otherwise. But then that's how truth is always revealed, through metaphors and conveying a message we wouldn't understand otherwise. So a quick summary of Genesis, the creation of the world. Day 3, God looks back on day 1, day 2, and 3 and says, you know what? This is good. Then on day 4, again, this is good. And then on day 5, again, this is good. And then on day 6, when he's done, God says, this is very good. That's a radical statement. It may well be the most radical statement in the Bible if you understand it to the level that God looked upon all that God had created and said, this is very good. Not our human way of saying, well, I like this, but I don't like that. Or that's good, or he's good, or she's good, but they're not so good. I don't want to be associated with them. God looked upon all that God had made and said, behold, this is very good. When was the last time you behold? When was the last time you can remember beholding? Was it the birth of a child? Or falling in love with your spouse? Or was it a life event where you transitioned from one stage to another stage, or saw a child transition from one stage to another stage, and in that moment you could behold at a level deeper than you thought of before? Maybe the most traumatic effect of death and dying is when we realize we can no longer behold them again. And so all those opportunities to behold that we missed are forever gone. There are opportunities in nature to behold and understand creation at a deeper level, but there's also opportunities in how we interact and value the other. You know, early on in my ministry, my ministry started middle age, but early on in that period, I started out seminary at an inner city seminary. And so my first immersion experience was in the fact I was in the minority. As an old white man, I was in the minority. I was surrounded by women of wisdom and people of color, and that was something to behold. It wasn't always enjoyable, but the end result, it was very good. But after that, after I was pastoring a local church, I went on a series of experiences of immersions across the globe. And everywhere I went, I was able to behold, this is very good. Palestine, where they constantly are under the threat of conflict. It was terrible to see at surface level. But when you got to engage with the people who were dealing with this every day and finding a way to make a life, to make a difference, to make peace, that was a treasure to behold. In the border in Mexico, in the border towns, there is terrible, abject poverty of shanty towns, of people who were confined to shanty towns so that we could have cheap TV sets. So it was terrible to see their poverty. But to behold their spirit, that was a sight. Same was true in Honduras, when I looked at the effect on environmental degradation and violence on the mass migration movement. It was terrible to see, but to be among the people who were finding a better way, that was wisdom to behold. I was up in Colombia, a dozen years ago, up in the Andes Mountains as part of the Christian Peacemaker team. And we're way up in the Andes. Well, I guess that's a relative term. It was hard to get to, and where we were at, there was no electricity. We were staying in the village council president's cabin. In fact, he had to move his kids to a neighbor's cabin because there'd be no room for us to sleep there, the Christian Peacemaker team. But anyway, we're up there. There's no electricity. So being an old man, in the middle of the night, I had to go outside. But when I stumbled outside and I looked up, the stars, because I was up in the mountains and there was no electricity, there was no pollution of lights, the stars were so stunning to behold, I actually broke out in song. In the pre-dawn darkness, I broke out in an old hymn. You know the old hymn, How Great Thou Art. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the works thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. And then the chorus has this delightful line. Then sings my soul. What makes your soul sing? What so touches you that your soul leaps in song? That's where you find hope. When your soul leaps for joy. Not that long ago, in my hometown of Aurora, Illinois, violence came, destruction came. Just a few days and nights ago, my city was ripped by violence. Windows smashed, cop cars set on fire, objects flying through the air, massive police forces, angry people. 3 blocks from where we live, we could see the fires and the smoke and the sounds, hear the sounds, and my heart broke. As you see, the reason we live in Aurora, we moved from Michigan 7 years ago to live in the middle of our grandkids in Illinois. And we purposely chose Aurora because Aurora was the most diversified city we could find. You will find this level of diversity in City Hall. You find it throughout the government. In fact, in the police forces, you find this level of diversity. They are actually a majority-minority community. There's absolutely no understanding for violence to break out in downtown Aurora. And so I wept. The last thing my soul wanted to do was to sing, seeing what was going on. But the next day, as I took my morning walk, I purposely went where the damage was. And I was stunned because instead of just destruction, I saw hundreds and hundreds of volunteers out there cleaning up the destruction. Everywhere I looked, there were people with shovels and brooms and boards and hammers, and they were about the work of putting the downtown back together. And my soul wanted to sing. And over the next several days, all of those boarded up windows, the city invited in the street artists and the poets, and they came in and they turned all of those boards into artwork and messaging to transform our society. And my heart wanted to sing, my soul wanted to sing, and I found hope. From the despair of the destruction, I found hope. Most radical statement in the Bible to me is that God looked upon all that God created and said, this is very good. That takes a leap of faith for us to come to. That we can look upon what's going on and instead of just giving a glance, instead of giving it a knee-jerk reaction, actually look deeper and find the very good that's transforming our society. What would God have us behold? I would suggest to you, you know it. You know it. Again and again and again in the Gospels, Jesus says it. People go up to him and they say, Master, what's the most important thing for me to do? And he says, you know, love God, love neighbor, love self. We haven't done a very good job at that. If there's ever a time in our society to be awakened to that call to love, to behold at a deeper level what God would have us do, I would suggest to you it is now. And what I would further suggest to you, that it's in that beholding you will find hope. This day and all days. Amen.